Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Welcome back to another episode of Who Will Be the Biggest Flop? This is part 12, and another new movie kept Barbie in a distant second place in this weekend's domestic box office. But Barbie achieved another milestone, which I'll be talking about shortly. As per usual, we'll introduce our first contestant that has no box office updates this week since it is no longer playing in any theaters worldwide. So let's have a big round of applause for the entry from Warner Bros. Discovery and DC Studios, that completely underperforming superhero movie The Flash, starring everyone's favorite wackadoodle actor, Ezra Miller. The movie's final global gross box office ended at $268.5 million. The movie's estimated break-even point range is calculated by multiplying the movie's highly bloated production budget of $300 million by 2.5 and 3.0 to account for the 50% of gross ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget. And that calculation yields an estimated break-even point range of $750 million to $900 million. Which means that the movie's final global gross box office loss ranges between $481.5 million to $631.5 million. So when we divide that range by 2, it yields a range of possible loss for Warner Bros. Discovery and DC Studios of $240.8 million to $315.8 million, which places The Flash into first place. Our next movie is one that premiered worldwide this weekend. So let's have a warm round of applause for the movie from Columbia Pictures entitled The Equalizer 3. Domestically, the movie opened with $42 million, which put it into first place in this weekend's domestic box office, well ahead of the number 2 movie. Internationally, the movie opened with $26.1 million to give The Equalizer 3 a global gross box office opening weekend of $68.1 million. With a production budget of $70 million, when we multiply that by 2.5 and 3.0, we get an estimated break-even point range of $175 million to $210 million. And when I project this movie's possible final global gross box office forward by using a range of possible average weekly drops of 40 to 30%, we get values ranging between $177.4 million to $226.6 million. Thus, The Equalizer 3 could possibly break even, or it may lose somewhere between $0 to $32.6 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when we divide by 2, means that Columbia Pictures may lose anywhere between $0 to $16.3 million. So given that The Equalizer 3 may break even or only lose a very small amount of money as compared with our other biggest flop contestants, it won't be joining Who Will Be the Biggest Flop as a contestant. This brings us to the movie that came in a rather distant second place behind The Equalizer 3 at this weekend's domestic box office. So let's have a very warm welcome for that extremely successful movie from Warner Bros. Discovery and Mattel Entertainment, none other than Barbie, starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. Domestically, the movie earned another $10.6 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $609.5 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $26 million to bring its current international box office total up to $771.5 million. So globally, the movie earned another $40.7 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $1,381 million, which makes Barbie the highest grossing movie worldwide for 2023 by surpassing the current global gross box office earned by the Super Mario Bros. Movie by $21.6 million. So here's a huge congratulations to Barbie. Naturally, the movie broke even a long time ago, so I won't go over its break-even point. But by using a range of possible average weekly drops in box office of 40 to 30%, allows me to project that the movie's final global gross box office earnings may range somewhere between $1,441.8 million to $1,474 million, which is a narrower range than what I had projected last week. Now we'll move on to the movie that came in third place at this weekend's domestic box office and is our second contestant. So let's have a warm welcome for another entry from Warner Bros. Discovery and DC Studios, another one of their underperforming superhero movies, Blue Beetle, starring Xolo Maridueña. Domestically, the movie earned another $7.3 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $56.5 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $9.8 million to bring its current international box office total up to $45.3 million. So globally, the movie earned another $20.1 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $101.9 million. So the movie has managed to break through the $100 million threshold globally, but its domestic share remains the highest within the DCEU at 55.5%, which is nearly as high as it was last week and still at a rather large 2.59 standard deviations away from the DCEU's overall average domestic share. So Blue Beetle may end up having the largest domestic share for any DCEU movie when its theatrical run is over, which is a direct indication to it being even less popular outside of the US than it is within the US. With a production budget of $120 million, when we multiply that by 2.5 and 3.0 to estimate a break-even point range, we get values of $300 million to $360 million. And when I project the movie's potential final global gross box office moving forward using the franchise's overall average weekly drop of 40.06% and one standard deviation above and below, that yields a range of $122.4 million, $131.9 million, and $147.1 million, which is a narrower range than last week's projections, but it also moved towards the lower end of last week's projection. So the movie may potentially lose anywhere from $152.9 million to $237.6 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when we divide by 2, means that Warner Bros. Discovery and DC Studios may lose as much as $76.5 million to $118.8 million. Currently, Blue Beetle sits in second place behind The Flash. This brings us to the movie that came in fourth place at this weekend's domestic box office. So let's have a warm welcome for the movie from Columbia Pictures and PlayStation Productions, Gran Turismo, based on a true story. Domestically, the movie earned another $6.6 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $30.6 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $13.8 million to bring its current international box office total up to $50.3 million. And when we add the domestic and international box office totals together, we get a combined current global gross box office total of $80.9 million. Now, similar to what I said last week, the movie's current final global gross box office projections and its estimated break-even points indicate that it may or may not break even, which, if it doesn't, it won't be large enough to be a contender for who will be the biggest flop. So we'll move on to one of the other very successful movies that premiered the same weekend as Barbie and came in 5th place overall at this weekend's domestic box office. So let's have a warm welcome for the movie Oppenheimer. Domestically, the movie earned another $5.5 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $308.5 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $65.5 million, which was a 47% gain over last week's international earnings, to bring its current international box office total up to $542.7 million. So globally, the movie earned another $75.8 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $853 million. As with Barbie, Oppenheimer broke even some time ago, so I won't go over its break-even points. But by using average weekly drops of 40 to 30%, I am currently projecting that Oppenheimer's final global gross box office will probably range between $996.2 million to $1,026.3 million. So thanks to its large international boost in box office this week, Oppenheimer could potentially break $1 billion at the global box office. I will now briefly mention that Meg 2: The Trench came in 8th place during this weekend's domestic box office and is still currently moving towards breaking even in the next few weeks. That brings us to our third contestant, which hails from Disney and remained in 12th place in this weekend's domestic box office. So please give a warm welcome for the very poorly timed remake Haunted Mansion, which stars Rosario Dawson and was directed by Justin Simeon. The movie earned another $1.3 million domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $64.1 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $6.2 million to bring its current international box office total up to $35.6 million. So globally, the movie earned another $8.3 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $100 million. Thus, Haunted Mansion also managed to break through the $100 million global gross box office threshold this weekend. Given that the movie's production budget is $157.8 million, this means that its estimated break-even point ranges between 2.5 to 3.0 times that, or $394.5 million to $473.4 million. By using a range of possible average weekly drops of 40 to 30%, I can project that the movie's possible final global gross box office earnings might be somewhere between $112.5 million to $119.2 million, which is a slightly higher projection than last week due to the movie having a small gain in its international box office earnings over last week. Thus, the movie is currently looking to lose somewhere between $275.3 million to $360.9 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when we divide by 2, means that Disney is looking to lose somewhere between $137.6 million to $180.5 million, which puts the movie into second place behind The Flash and one place ahead of Blue Beetle. And that brings us to our fourth contestant that dropped to 13th place overall in this weekend's domestic box office. So let's have a warm welcome for the entry from Paramount Pictures, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 starring Tom Cruise. Domestically, the movie earned another $1.2 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $170.1 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $5.8 million to bring its current international box office total up to $389.7 million. So globally, the movie earned another $8.2 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $560.2 million. Since the movie has a $290 million production budget, when we multiply that by 2.5 and 3.0 to calculate an estimated break-even point range, we get values of $725 million to $870 million respectively. Using the movie's current average weekly drop of 37.78%, we get a projected possible final global gross box office for the movie of $573.6 million. So currently, the movie is looking to lose as much as $148.1 million to $293.1 million in global gross box office revenue. And when we divide that range by 2, it looks like Paramount Pictures could lose somewhere between $74 million to $146.5 million, which puts Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 into third place behind The Flash and Haunted Mansion, and one place ahead of Blue Beetle. And that brings us to our fifth and final contestant, which rose to 19th place overall in this weekend's domestic box office. So let's have a warm welcome for Kathleen Kennedy's truly terrible entry from Disney and Lucasfilm, Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction, starring the 81-year-old Harrison Ford. Domestically, the movie only took in $119,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $174.3 million. Internationally, the movie brought in another $1.7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $206.9 million. So globally, the movie earned another $1.8 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $381.1 million. And when we project that forward by using the movie's current average weekly drop of 20.98%, we get a projected final global gross box office for Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction of $387.2 million. The movie also has an estimated break-even point ranging from $736.8 million to $884.1 million, which is obtained by multiplying the movie's bloated production budget of $294.7 million by 2.5 and 3.0, respectively. Thus, Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction currently stands to lose somewhere between $349.6 million to $496.9 million in global gross box office revenue. And when we divide that range by 2, we get a possible range of losses for Disney and Lucasfilm of $174.8 million to $248.5 million, which places Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction into second place. So to recap this week's results, The Flash sits in first place, Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction sits in second place, Haunted Mansion sits in third place, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 sits in fourth place, and Blue Beetle sits in fifth place. So be sure to tune in next week for another exciting episode of Who Will Be the Biggest Flop? Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.